In the previous video about getting the benefits from playing scales, I talked about the pentatonic scale and numbered the degrees of the scale. I'd like to go a little bit further into that with this video, which is about music theory for fiddlers. Theory, at least the practical application of it, begins from playing a scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those 8 notes of the scale comprise a complete octave scale. 7 of the notes are different, and the 8th note is called by the same name as the first note. This is a D scale, and those are the D notes. Scales are spoken of in terms of classical theory as being made up of 2 tetrachords. Tetra might sound like 4, chords like strings. In the ancient lyre, perhaps they were made up of 4 strings. So the tetrachord would be the first 4 notes of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the second tetrachord, the next 4 notes of the scale. 5, 6, 7, 8. We will use that numbering system to take music theory all the way from the scale through intervals to chords and eventually chord progressions. Notice first that the scale is made up of what are called steps. That's a whole step. Another whole step. That's a half step. That's a whole step. A whole step. Another whole step, and finally, the last step is a half step. The whole step is like a piano that you move from a white key to another white key, and there's a black key in between. On the violin or the fiddle, you have 2 notes that are separated by about a finger's width. See if I can just put my finger in between here. You can see there's just about room for a finger to fit in between the nut of the violin, right here. I'm talking about the nut right here, not the nut that's holding the violin. Here's the nut. Here's my finger. There's room to put a finger tip in here. That makes it a whole step. Similarly, moving to the next whole step also leaves a space where you can put a finger in between. Now, if there's no room for a finger, that is a half step. So that's our rule of thumb on whole steps and half steps in the violin. The most important interval to learn when you are first learning to play the violin, if you're a beginner, is this first step. You just really want to get that in your system. Sometimes I think of it as the sound of a European paddy wagon. Like that. Anyway, you want to get that sound in your mind very well to learn to play the violin in tune if you're a beginner. And as you move along, you get the sound of a scale anchored into your mind very securely. So we're starting off with those 8 notes, each one of which is numbered. The half steps are between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. Let's notice that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's where the half steps are. Now the next part of music theory would be focusing on intervals. An interval is 2 notes, which are usually different. When the notes are exactly the same, say the open D and the same note played on the G string, that's called a unison. You've heard of singing in unison. Everyone hopefully is singing the same pitch. Singing in harmony means people are singing 2 different notes. The first interval we're going to look at is called a second. Here's 1, here's 2. That makes an interval of a second. If I play them at the same time, they make a sound that is called dissonant. It's a dissonant sound, not an easy sound to listen to. The next interval is the interval of a third. Here's 1. We skip 2 and play 3. That's the interval of a third. That's a consonant interval. That's easy to listen to. That can sound very sweet. The next interval is a fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 4. That's a fourth. Now that interval is called a perfect interval because when it's played in tune, there are no interference waves or cross vibrations. It has a very pure sound. There are 3 perfect intervals, besides the unison, that is. 1 is the fourth. The next one is our next interval, the fifth. We move from 1 to 5. That would be a little bit more perfect if my violin was better in tune, wouldn't it? Slight improvement. So that's called a perfect interval also. You may have heard that the violin is tuned in perfect fifths, and this is the example of it, the fifth. The next one is the sixth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's also a pleasant sounding interval. Now the seventh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's also considered dissonant. That's hard to listen to. And finally, the octave is our last perfect interval.